Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll try to be specific when I talk, and I will try also to leave some room for questions, because I think that's important, not just to give lectures, but to have a dialogue. So, as it was said as an introduction, I'm a media lawyer. I'm a practicing media lawyer in Russia. For the last 26 years, I've been director of the only Russian NGO that works on media freedom and provides legal assistance and legal defense to journalists, media outlets, and bloggers, and now for those who exercise the freedom of expression and unfortunately are pressured for that. My organization provides legal assistance to journalists, both who are in the country now and who have to practice journalism in exile. And this is the new situation for all of us, and I probably will start from that. As Anastasia already said, we are living in a time of informal military censorship, which is legally based on the new legislation. And the situation with the war have changed the status quo, which was within the country, could be formulated that the society is not engaged in political activities, and the government is creating some kind of stability and quiet life, not wealthy, because majority of population is extremely poor, and the gap between elite and the authorities and those who actually, like regular citizens, the gap is huge. And those who are supporters now, though they are mainly the poorest population, which have never been outside the country, which have rarely even traveled to Moscow, because according to statistics, only 19% of Russian population has travel passports, meaning that they can actually travel abroad. Only 2% had ever had Schengen visas. So we deal with people who have never seen how life is outside Russia. And if they live in rural area somewhere in Siberia, they haven't even seen how Moscow lives. And Moscow is like a very wealthy, cosmopolitan, very comfortable, digitalized, and like with all possible services city. And of course, for people from like a little village in Far East or South Russia, it's like different world, different country. Sometimes they even say, so I'm going to Russia, when they speak from Dagestan or from Vladivostok, from Far East. And that tells a lot about the country. And that kind of status quo was for years. So the federal government didn't put pressure on regular people. They have not been repressed. And those who are like independent media and stuff, for regular people, that was not quite, clear what was happening. They didn't see that picture in the television. So, and basically, we lived kind of like in a parallel realities, and government created their own one for themselves. As my colleague already said, they created this informational bubble and of propaganda, and they trusted it. And the decisions which were made this year basically were made out of this false propaganda bubble. And the rationale behind it is totally false just because it was created for years. And unfortunately, those people who make decisions, they trusted the propaganda they created for themselves and for the general public. So we are in a historical moment when we have to somehow understand, analyze that, and change it. So that's my starting point for the global development. As we talk about the global development in media, I think it's important to understand that it's not that simple to change this situation now, because it's in such a crisis on different levels. It's not just about media, it's not just about the legislation, it's not just about international relations. Like many things are jeopardized now. And as many Russian media have been blocked in Russia, as the war started, the crackdown was a bit earlier than 24th of February, I would say, because in media field, the moment when Russian authorities started to target independent media with blocking them, with designating them as foreign agents. That was a bit earlier, like in my life, in my work area. This crackdown was a couple of years ago when it was clearly, the situation was in such a crisis that media were thinking how to proceed, how to actually work in very hostile environment, not just political environment, but also legal environment. So we've been meeting with independent media every half a year to discuss, to create some kind of like understanding, to develop some kind of understanding and strategies how to deliver information, independent information to general public, and how we lawyers can actually support journalists who are in trouble, because they became the work they've been doing, it was always targeted for the last like 15 years. So situation is in crisis not right now. It's been developing for a decade at least. But now it's in a situation when 250 independent media have been blocked just within 3 first weeks of war. They had to relocate because of rapid change of legislation. Just within a few days, Russian government, Russian parliament introduced laws that provided them a tool to put in prison up to 15 years people for covering the war, calling the war that name, like the war, then discrediting Russian forces, armed forces, for international cooperation. Like for us, Russian citizens, even talking in Danish parliament is a criminal offense. So it's like up to 8 years of imprisonment for international, confidential international cooperation. So, and many other things. And journalists, when they've been seeing all these negative developments in regulation, they've been ready to cope with high fines. They've been trying to go around some content restrictions. They taught themselves how to talk to the audience using synonyms, words that would clearly give understanding what they want to talk about, but not to jeopardize the content, and so the website or social media platform would not be blocked by authorities. So they taught themselves this language which clearly would deliver the right content. But even that was jeopardized in March and February, because if you continue practice journalism with high professional standards, that is already not just the blocking of your media. It's up to 15 years of imprisonment. That's why they had to just pack themselves, families, and leave the country. So we assess the number of journalists who are now working from relocation for up to 1,000 journalists from independent Russian media. And why I'm saying that? Because it's not a migration. They work from exile, but they don't ask for asylum. They are still working for the audience in Russia because they have to talk to Russian people. They have to deliver independent information, and they're facing so many problems because they are not wanted. They actually wanted in Russia, right? So they are not welcomed in Russia. So they chased outside the country. They are under criminal investigations. They are under international wanted list of Interpol. Journalists, like we have dozens of journalists who are under criminal cases just for reporting, and they don't feel themselves secure in other countries of relocation. This is another problem that we face now, and this is just not for a problem for Russian journalists, also for Belarusian journalists, for journalists from Afghanistan, from Syria. So it's a general trend that journalism in exile is not easy, and we have to deal with that. We somehow have to find a solution how journalists who are relocated from the countries of their origin and still continuing the reporting for their home countries, how they can actually operate safely from different jurisdictions. So we see that, as an example, TV Rain, independent Russian television Dost. In English, it's called train. So they relocated to Latvia. And you might have heard that a few days ago, Latvian National Council on Broadcasting Media, they withdrew the license of Dost for 3 violations. The first one was that they called in one of the reportings Russian army, our army, and the Latvian National Council considered that as misinformation for the national public, meaning that Russian journalists who are saying our army mean that parts of Russian military forces are part of Latvian army. Because if you report from Riga, it means that our army is our Latvian army. And this is actually a reporting in Russian language for the Russian audience by Russian national media in exile. So that was one of the mistakes, which was a legal ground for withdrawal of license. And the other one was that they did not have a chance, well, they didn't really have a proper time, because they just started in July, to subtitle all the programs in Latvian language. Because again, this is actually the content aimed on Russian audience. So they actually have to report for the Russian audience. And subtitling the television into a national language they report from, it's a very difficult and costly task, and it takes time. So within 2 days, the license was withdrawn on that basis. So this is another issue. Coming back to the question which was asked by someone, by the moderator, I think, to Anastasia, would that help to ban Russian national propaganda? I firmly believe it's not the right approach, and we discussed that on many platforms, in many occasions, because each time European Union or elsewhere, like United States, would ban Russian RT, for instance, or Sputnik, each time that would end the story of independent media, some independent media in Russia, because the Russian authorities reply like, look, this is something, this is the proof that we're not welcomed, they don't like us, this and that, and they violate their own rules, they're against media, we're reporting based on local legislation and based on legal license, and they banned us. So in reply, they banned something like a local independent Russian media or independent foreign media, like that was the reply to Germany on refusal to license RT in Germany in February. So the next day, Deutsche Welle was sent out of the country. The license was withdrawn. They had to give back accreditation cards, and bureau was closed. So that each time it's like a symmetric reply, which only makes the situation worse. So the general developments, as I see them, I gave you a few examples of what is happening, but general developments, just as a overall view, and to sum up my short intervention, I think that we are in a situation when we have to just internationally, between different actors, to find a solution how to support free flow of information and free media, even when they are jeopardized and targeted and thrown out of their own countries. Because if they will not be able to settle down and work in shelter in some safe jurisdiction, relying on standard and understandable regulation and supported by the community, they won't be able to deliver the truth and independent information to their homeland, to their general public in the country which is totally under propaganda television. So this is something that is a very difficult task. Another issue that is actually, and I'm pleased to say that Russian independent media even though it's chased out of the country and works mainly from relocation from 15+ jurisdictions, they collaborate between each other. They are probably strongest as ever, even if it might sound strange, but they are really strong now because they are not afraid anymore. They outside the country, even though they are still at risk because they can be targeted under criminal law, because they still produce content in Russian language, they target Russian audience, and they are Russian citizens. But they are actually free now because they are outside the country and they can not expect search in their house at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. So, but they have to have some kind of like reasonable support to continue their work. And they collaborate between themselves. There is no competition anymore between media because the advertisement market is totally gone. There is no advertisement model for independent media in Russia anymore. And that means that they can freely collaborate between each other and also within independent media from different countries. So that's how they publish in collaboration with Der Spiegel, with the New York Times, with Guardian, with other media, which is extremely important because that gives like a broader access to public in different countries. Another clear crisis, which I just will name and I will be happy to elaborate on that later, is a crisis in international justice. Because as a lawyer, I cannot just say how horrible it is to lose access to justice. As Russian journalists and media have lost access to justice in their home country because there is no fair trial, of course, on cases related to freedom of expression and media freedom. But at the same time, we have lost European Court of Human Rights because Russia is no longer a member of Council of Europe, and we still will be able to continue for some time to bring cases to Strasbourg on violations which occurred before September 16th, but that will be like a tale of comet for like a year or two. But then it's only UN Council of Human Rights, UN Human Rights Council, and that will be another crisis because the capacity is not there to absorb that many cases that would come to the United Nations mechanisms with relation to violations committed to Russian Federation, which will put the rest of the countries in a situation when UN Human Rights Committee will be basically paralyzed by the number of cases coming. And so this is something that human rights lawyers are discussing seriously, that some kind of reform is actually needed on international level to secure and to ensure that people whose rights were violated, including in my field, in the area of freedom of expression and media freedom, that has to be somehow secured on international level. Otherwise, it's very difficult to proceed for independent media, understanding that they have no justice, neither in their own country, nor on international level. So that's something that we have to also bear in mind. And the very last point, considering that Monica was here, I don't see her now. So the high-tech giants, these huge platforms, they as intermediaries, the role is so essential now for free speech and free media. And for instance, Russian media, which have been living country, they are considering the dialogue with the society via social media. They can't publish anything online on the website. Well, they can, but the general public will have access to these platforms only via using VPN, which by itself now becomes a danger because there is a first case in Russia where a regular citizen was actually found liable under criminal code, punished for just using VPN for regular, like not for the business, just in everyday life. So this is something that the new way to target people, to stop them reading. So social media, reading and reaching out for independent information. So social media is actually the last platform which is still accessible for people, like Telegram, like Facebook, of course some Russian platforms, but they're totally under control of Russian government. But still, it's still possible. YouTube, of course, is like the main source of information, and that has to be somehow, addressed as well, because these platforms, they stopped monetization of bloggers, Russian bloggers on YouTube, just because of the Russian citizenship. And this is a clear, not just discrimination on a citizenship basis, but it also jeopardizes free flow of information, because all these independent bloggers and media outlets, independent media, they've been using YouTube just as a simple platform for reaching out their audience. And now they cannot support themselves using this mechanism. So this is something that also has to be addressed, the role of intermediaries, the financial sustainability of independent media, the cooperation on international level, international justice, and also the last point, and I'm sorry, I'm taking 30 seconds over my time. The last point, which really bothers me personally, because I was involved in developing the new standards recommendations for the Council of Europe on hate speech, combating hate speech. And those recommendations have been, it was a working group, and I was involved in developing the new standards. And it's a really good set of principles how to combat hate speech in media, in different spheres of life, including social media, education, culture, and all the rest. And it seems that, those recommendations just have passed by the Committee of Ministers and adopted by Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe in May 2022. And now it looks like we've done this work for nothing, because the level of hate speech in media, like in general in different countries, is abnormal. It's abnormal. It's so huge. How we can get back to like the previous standards and normality, like the previous European standards, how we can put this language back to what we thought is important and valuable to as like on equality basis and those values of human rights. So now it looks like politically it's a sensitive issue, and all the hate speech, which is like circling around in social media and different countries' media, national media, in different languages, it's not under no control. So it seems that we are facing a new crisis, how we will put new standards and media back to at least situation, pre-war situation. So this is something that we also have to, discuss sometime in the future. So this is my few thoughts about general developments. So thank you.